All right. Warmest welcome to my students, of course. So I'm going to start with a little silly story about Uris Hall, and then I'm going to go to the school presentation. But it's funny that all of you want to go and tour Uris. And I can tell you, I spent 23 years there before we moved to this campus. So, I have a lot of stories about Uris Hall. But I can tell you, during COVID, we all went home. And then 3 months later, I kind of like more or less forced our faculty to start coming back so that we would teach in person in the fall. And so I started going to the office every day, and then you would see the faculty that would show up, and we would all be wearing face masks, and you would see how they would smile. They would be beaming, happy to be back in Uris Hall. It took a pandemic for people to actually fall in love with the campus, and it took 25, 40-year separation from Uris Hall to feel that fond feeling for all of you to be willing to go back. But this new home that we have is incredible, and for those of you that are seeing it for the first time, I hope you take time to sort of walk around and enjoy it. I can tell you that the students love it. Our community loves it. The school functions in a different way. All of this campus was made possible by the generosity of our alumni, and for that we're profoundly thankful. And you should all feel proud about what's happening at the school. Now I'm going to sort of go through some slides, and then we're going to have a discussion with Tracy Travis, who is sitting right here, and I'm going to introduce her in a bit. But the main thing that I want you to remember from what I'm going to say is that the school is doing well. Okay, we're in a good phase. Sort of students are happy. We're doing a lot of work in the classroom. We're changing the curriculum. People are finding jobs, and we're going to return to that in a bit. But in some sense, the school is in a good phase. The second thing that I want you to remember is that this period that we're going through, and let's say the next decade or so, is going to be an enormously dynamic period for the school. A lot of things are changing, okay? And the same way you think a lot of things are changing in your world and in your life, a lot of things are changing in here, okay? So, we're fully committed and we're driving forward. So now let me just jump in. We have a new president. She's starting in 3.5 weeks, July 1st. Jennifer Minukin. She's coming from University of Wisconsin in Madison, where she was chancellor. Before that, she was dean of the law school at UCLA, a lawyer by training. We have a couple of new deans that I'm not going to introduce. Dennis has been actually at the university for 30 years or so. And Jono just joined as the Mailman School. This is the School of Public Health, which is actually kind of is going through a difficult period, and Jono is fantastic. Now, we had a wonderful commencement a few weeks ago. We had sort of two incredible events, and we have started a new tradition, which it started accidentally. It started after October 7th, where we took commencement away from the main campus, as you all remember, and we took it to the football field, which is sort of about 75 blocks north of where we are right now. And we had the question at that point in time is where we're going to have the reception. So we decided to actually bring all the families back here for the reception, and families loved it, okay? You get flooded with 6,000 individuals, the graduates, their friends, their families. They start walking around the buildings. It's the first time that I guess we're serving wine in the buildings. We're having a hard time to get them to leave, okay? So we did that again a few weeks ago, and it was once again this most wonderful sort of half a day where families actually get to experience the campus, where they're Children have gone to school, friends are seeing and experiencing what the campus looks like, and it was wonderful. School is doing well. I said, I'm going to make one comment, the first one, because it's actually the better one, and it's slightly self-serving, but you'll understand what I mean in a second. So Poets and Quants, for those of you that don't know, it's an online blog that basically focuses on business education. And for those of you that know, Poets and Quants used to love to hate us for a variety of reasons, including Uris Hall, okay? It would make fun of Uris Hall like nonstop, right? And this past November voted us MBA Program of the Year. John Burns' article at the very end ended with a phrase that said, in a year of uncertainty, disruption, and change, Columbia Business School stands apart. And the reason is because they're not following the future, but they're driving it. Now, for those of you that have been hearing what we're doing here at the school and paying attention, you know that that's our effort. Our effort is really drive forward, change who we are, and really innovate in business education and what we do for our students. And it was wonderful for somebody else to actually say that back to us. So this is also important because, it translates into student interest and in some sense, the quality of life at the school. I want to tell you a little bit about business education in general, because you probably read a little bit about that sometimes in the newspaper, sometimes in The Economist or wherever else. So this is sort of little talking points from a meeting that I had with the deans of the other sort of top schools. We call them M7. M stands, if you believe it, for magnificent. It's just like such. I always knew that we call ourselves M7. I kind of never knew what M stands for. When I realized, I'm like, oh my God, but whatever. The M7 deans got together, and it was interesting. So here's what's happening. Demand and student interest in the M7 schools is very strong. And our students, we're enrolling incredible classes, and we're going to enroll an incredible class coming in the fall. In addition to that, our students, you read in the newspapers that people are not finding jobs. Top schools placing students very well. Okay, I'll return to that later on. What we're experiencing in the business school market in general is something that we call flight to quality. So all the interest is going at the very top, and in some sense, the opportunities are going at the very top. And schools that are sort of below that top echelon are actually feeling enormous amount of pressure. Okay, mid-tier schools are struggling. Slightly lower tier schools are shutting down their MBA programs. All right, so that's I'm going to skip. I'm not going to go through all these points. I'm going to say three sort of huge drivers, and I'm saying that because I'm going to ask for your help later on. One is AI is, of course, an area of investment. We're going to talk about that later on. I'm not going to belabor that point. Consulting and some of the other large corporate employers for us, consulting in one, financial services in the other, together they actually recruit a little bit more than 60% of our class. We're starting to see some cracks in recruiting in these areas. We're having dinner with Tracy and some alums yesterday, and we were discussing one of the major banks and investment banking. And for example, they're bringing in an incoming class that is 5% smaller than in years past. Okay, 5% is a small number, but M&A business is up 20%, and they're still going 5% below. So all things being equal, maybe they would have been growing by 10 or 15%, and they're down 5. Interestingly, and this is what I was saying earlier, At CBS, this year, the number of summer internships in investment banking is the highest it has ever been in the history of the school. So what I meant to say is, like, even though we're seeing some compression, we're not seeing it here. Okay, but that does not mean that the compression is not going to sort of come in. And where are the jobs going? So a lot of jobs is what I would call the N=1 trend. There are many employers that hire one person from the business school. 0 to 1. They could be startups. They could be small private equity firms. There could be a company that does something that wants a marketing manager. And in some sense, that's very different than when many of you were at school, where about 30 to 40 corporates would hire 80% or more of the class, right? In order for us to go to 80% right now, we need 250 employers. And in order to place the entire class, we need about 350. Okay? So that, career management has been an area of focus for the school, and it's actually an area of focus in all of our peers. So this is sort of systemic things that are happening in business schools. At the top, with investments, people are doing very well, and students are actually getting placed very well. And sort of as you start going down, things are actually tricky. So quick highlights before we move to the highlight of this session, which is our discussion with Tracy. So there is an enormous emphasis on AI, and in particular, what it's going to do to the economy, how it's going to change different jobs, how it's going to affect our students when they exit from the school. So there is enormous amount of effort in curriculum development. And I would classify curriculum in sort of 3 buckets, or the effort in 3 buckets. One is, which is the simplest one, is to sort of provide an overview of AI, what are neural networks, how a transformer works, when does it work, when does it not work, where is it being deployed successfully, why does it work in this environment and not in another. In some sense, if you understand anything about sort of the engineering underneath that, this is the simplest class to teach, okay? If I was on the faculty, I would be teaching that class, for example, okay? Because I come from this world. The second set of electives are, how is AI changing different industries or different jobs or different functions? How is changing marketing? What does it do to investing? What is it doing to accounting, to finance, et cetera? So there's a lot of work there, and that's a very evolving area, right? Because AI is only now being deployed in these industries. So, we kind of don't know exactly. This is sort of not a very settled set of curriculum, but this is a lot of work that is happening there. And then the third one is that AI is changing how education actually happens. It's changing pedagogy, okay? And we are investing a lot of effort in that space. We have created tools and that are actually being licensed by 16 other business schools right now. But this is a sort of a huge area of work. I'm going to tell you a funny anecdote, not to scare you, but just to tell you how urgent this is. So I was talking to a friend yesterday who was telling me about a buddy of his that is a very successful venture capitalist who has a big fund that invests on all startups related to AI. And he's one of these people that think AI is the greatest thing. And I'm not that far from that person, but he was making the analogy that, listen, is like you should think of it as before fire and after fire type of. So I said, I see you, and I'll raise, and I will raise you, because I'll tell you the following thing. It is true that AI is going to disrupt everything, and the industry that is being disrupted right now, and it is already on fire, is my industry. Because if you think about AI is right now, the sharpest manifestation of AI is as a knowledge device. And we are in the knowledge transmission and knowledge generation business. That's what we do. And in some sense, we're actually being disrupted right now. You know, if you come from the manufacturing sector, AI has not changed how you run your business or your factories or what your employees do on a day-to-day basis. It has changed already everything that we do here. Okay, and it's changing on a monthly basis. So there is a lot of work and a lot of emphasis in that space. Second, thought leadership. One thing that this incredible campus, this incredible room allows us to do is to bring in incredible leaders that we can actually convene here in New York, right? Every CEO either lives in New York or comes through New York. So we try to grab them once in a while and bring them here and have interesting conversations, both for our students and our community, but actually to broadcast it to the world. And this is something that we started in earnest 2 years ago, and we're going to be building on as the time goes on. And you know, these are some sort of numbers from this past year, but you know, we want to be ambitious in that space. We want to make CBS in New York the area where interesting business conversations take place. Entrepreneurship. An area where we're investing a lot is the broad area of entrepreneurship. A lot of our students are genuinely interested in that space. They're taking a lot of courses in that space. There's growth of new areas in the sort of vicinity of entrepreneurship. There's something called ETA, Entrepreneurship Through Acquisition, which is super popular with our students. You first need to understand what the hell are they talking about when you first hear it about. But in some sense, this is an area of big investment for us, both for our students and our alums, and actually also in a way we try to make the business school the center or the point of leverage for entrepreneurship throughout the university. We're actually best at doing that in the university, and maybe we can be the engine for entrepreneurship for the rest of Columbia University. So that's something that we're trying to do, and hopefully we're going to do more of that. I also think that as jobs start shifting, there are going to be more jobs in that space. And the reason for that is New York City's entrepreneurial scene is incredibly vibrant. Okay, 110 blocks south of here, there's an ecosystem of incredible companies that are doing incredible things. And you know, we need to sort of bolt on ourselves to that ecosystem. There is a new co-leader, co-director of our Lang Center, Jorge Guzman, who's going to be running it together with Angela Lee. You may have known Angela from before, and Jorge is going to be co-directing the center with her. Jorge works in that space, as does Angela. So let me talk a little bit about careers and then try to wrap up. So the main comment that I want to ensure you all remember is our students are actually doing well and they're getting placed well. Last year's placement record put us at the very top of this incredible M7 group that I was mentioning before. But in some sense, 2025 career placement was actually better than 2024. This year, our students that are just graduated are getting jobs. You know, we have to wait for a few months for the dust to settle, but they're doing very well. The people that are starting their internships right now, they're doing well. Okay? I mentioned record number of investment banking jobs. Miraculously, consulting is also flat or up. Okay? I was like, I'm waiting for that shoe to drop. It hasn't dropped. Okay? So in some sense, a lot of people are getting placed and they're doing well. But there is a trend. One trend is there are 200 first-time employers last year. These are 200 firms that have never hired from CBS that actually made their first hire last year. This means a real machine in actually building relationships with these new employers and then sort of making sure that we make that efficient and effective for our students. And this is where we want you to actually reach out back to the school, participate, hire our students and our graduates, okay? So that's the main point. Whatever you read in the newspaper is happening in some corners of the market. Thankfully, it is not happening at CBS's corner, okay? And we're doing everything we can to make sure that it's not gonna happen, okay? There is a huge investment. I'm not gonna go through these bullets. Don't read at them. There is a huge effort at Careers to make sure that we provide incredible opportunities for our students as things happen. Marilena is getting a lot of miles traveling around the world, but maybe it's half as many as my miles. So, because some of my Asia trips, she wasn't there. She skipped them. But I'm just joking, Marilena. What? Only Mumbai. Okay. Were you Taipei? Okay, good. That was a busy trip. So we're trying to engage with all of you, and we hope to keep finding opportunities to do so. We want you to be coming back here. We want to bring you in our classes. I tell people, there are some people that were my students in stats, and when students come into the class, and some of us, the professors, nobody looks at us and says, I want to be that guy. Certainly then nobody said, I want to teach statistics. Or I'd rather go and do a PhD in electrical engineering. That's what I want to do. But when you come to class, they look at you and they say, I want to be that person. That is a role model. This is a career journey that I would like to have. It's inspiring. And that's why we want you to actually connect with our students. Okay? We want you to come to class, take them to lunch, talk to them in class. So in some sense, because you serve as role models, whereas the faculty, serve a different purpose, but they're not role models because the people in our class don't want to become faculty. So that's important. We're going to keep engaging all around the world, and you're going to keep seeing us all around the world, and we want to sort of help strengthen the alumni network wherever you are and back here. And then the last thing I'm going to say is that we mentioned a little bit about lifelong learning earlier on. And an effort that we started 7 years ago was we launched this lifelong learning platform called Alumni Edge. Does anybody know about it? A few people. Has anybody taken a course? Okay, half a dozen. All right, so one thing that is happening right now is we're developing all of these sort of curricular assets on AI for our students, and I hope that we're going to start converting them and making them available to all of you, okay? So that's something that we hope to be doing sort of over the summer, the fall, and next year, so that as things mature in the classroom, we're going to be sort of spending a little bit of time converting them into an online course that we can then offer to all of you, and then you can sort of take it from Alumni Edge, all right? So why don't I stop, and I'm not going to take questions, simply so that we can go on with the highlight of the show. All right. So thank you.